and just holy. This team is so dumb. It's so easy. You don't have to think at all. What's going on, Genshin Impact players? Today, I want to talk about something that I haven't had the chance to yet. This is going to be a new way to play Raiden. Now, when I say new, I mean new in context of the videos that I've put up before. It's new in that it's 3.0 plus. The thing is, when I made my first Raiden guide, my initial video, Dendro wasn't out yet, so I couldn't cover Dendro things, and I honestly don't really have time to make a full Raiden guide over the holidays, so instead I wanted to just show you the one thing that I couldn't put in my video, which is about Hyperbloom. So as you know, Raiden is already an insanely good unit. She's super valuable, does a lot of damage, is a battery for your team, constant electro applications. She's great. She's a fantastic character, and she's really cool and fun to play. When you add Dendro to that, it sort of makes her even better. Usually when you play Raiden, you're playing her with weapons like Engulfing Lightning, if you manage to get this one. The Catch, which is going to be the free-to-play option that a lot of players have, and if they don't have it, then they've probably opted for something else, like Favonius, Prototype Star Glitter, they have Battle Pass, Deathmatch, etc. There's a lot of polearms you can use for her, and you would usually build her sort of like a DPS, but with an energy recharge stance, right? That's how you build Raiden. You also basically always use her signature set, which is going to be Emblem of Severed Fate. The reason is that she gains damage based off of her energy recharge, and having high energy recharge will allow her to get her 90 cost burst back. This also makes it so more energy recharge is more damage. So basically Raiden is just this amazing absolute powerhouse of a unit and just a very good overall pull. Now, when you play Raiden, typically there's two teams that people think of as like her big teams, like the big teams that people are usually playing her in. You have Raiden, Xingqiu, Bennett, and Xiangling, which is Raiden National. The reason this is so good is because it's so easy to play. Raiden's going to help you get your burst back on Xingqiu and Xiangling and Bennett, and it's going to deal lots of overload damage. Meanwhile, you're also getting damage from National. So it's an overvape setup, and it's very good, very easy to play, and free to play friendly. Alternatively to that, you have something like Raiden Hyper Carry. Now this one is less free to play friendly because you want constellations on Sora, you want up to C2, and on Kazuha, he's just a 5-star, right? So you have to be aware of that. But outside of that, this is relatively free to play friendly since you have 2 4-stars here. Hypothetically, you could use someone like Sucrose, but it doesn't really work with Thrilling Tales and Sara because Sara needs to pass a buff to Raiden, but Sucrose also needs to pass a buff to Raiden. It's just a whole thing. But usually you can also replace Kazuha with someone like Zhongli if you want more shred and things like that. These are the two main teams that people think of usually when they're talking about Raiden teams because these are the easiest ones to get access to and the easiest ones to play. And just for those of you who are going to comment about it, yes, I know Raiko exists. But what a lot of people haven't tried yet is Raiden Hyperbloom. So in this example, I'm going to show you with Nahida, but also we'll have free-to-play examples as well. This video is sponsored by Path to Nowhere, a free-to-play tactical and real-time strategy story game. Path to Nowhere tells its story of prison and crime with unique elements such as superpowers, Cthulhu, SCP, and more. As chief of the Crisis Control Bureau, MBCC, it's your job to deal with the criminals known as sinners. As a result, you make these criminals into beings with superpowers and use them to fight off evil monsters and help subdue the plague afflicting the rest of the human race. Each sinner character has their own unique powers, and you'll have to think about where each character fits best. Path to Nowhere also has their own unique art style, with dark and gritty styles being featured throughout the game. One of my personal favorite characters is Nox, because she's got drip. She looks mysterious and deals insane damage. Waifu versus meta? No, waifu is meta. You'll see this when you play through various innovative tower defense stages where you'll need to take advantage of different sinners and ultimate skills to eventually defeat the enemy. If you start Path to Nowhere now, it's having its biggest event this year. In Dreamy Bubble, you'll pick up 2 new sinners to add to your roster, and throughout the event, you'll even gain tons of in-game items, login rewards, and the brand new Sinner Mess for free. If you're interested in compelling story and real-time strategy, download and try Path to Nowhere through the QR code on screen or the link down below. And make sure you use the gift code PTN Braxo for a bunch of in-game rewards. Now back to the video. To make a Hyperbloom, you just need Electro, Dendro, and Hydro. You need Dendro and Hydro to make the cores, and then you need Electro to trigger them, and that makes your Hyperbloom. I don't think I explained this well enough. So basically, the reason that Hyperbloom has been so strong for so many different Spiral Abyss rotations is because since Dendro, they've been trying to counter a couple different elements at a time per Abyss, but they haven't really made an attempt to counter Dendro, and the attempt that they did make to counter Dendro with the Dendro Chicken didn't really work out too well because you have Deepwood Memories that just lowers resistance anyways, and Hyperbloom is so strong as an archetype that it kind of just shreds the chicken anyways. Hyperbloom is insanely high single target damage, very easy to get a lot of reward out of, can hit flying enemies, and has been good every Abyss since 3.0 just due to them trying to counter Pyro, trying to counter Hydro, trying to counter Electro, but not being able to successfully counter Dendro. So in this team we're using Xingqiu. This will help us add a little bit more Hydro damage, constant Hydro application, damage resistance, and a little bit of healing. The reason I haven't filled out this spot is because it's pretty flexible, and what you're gonna see us use is we're actually gonna use Kokomi here, and the reason we're doing this is just for healing. However, there's other ways to do this too, and I'll show you a free-to-play one as an example. But in this team, typically since we have so much Hydro, you're actually gonna wanna have Nahida Nahida on field. You can periodically, with Nahida's burst that shares elemental mastery, you can periodically go into Raiden, and Raiden will get increased Hyperbloom damage, which is pretty good. But if you want to create more blooms and deal more Hyperbloom damage, you keep Nahida on the field. And I usually keep Thrilling Tales on Nahida to pass buff to Sync Cho for a little bit. But instead of Kokomi 2, if you wanted to, you could also run Kazuha. And if you run Kazuha, there's a little bit of variance to the build, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Alternatively, you can play other Anemo units, but I mean, this is basically one of the teams that you can run. If you're a free-to-play player, you probably don't have access to everything. So let's say, as an example, you can use Dendro MC instead of Nahida, and it's not going to be perfect, but it does work out fairly well. And then I just put Barbara in here as a healer. You don't always need a healer for this team. Technically, you can get away without a healer in the first half. If you decide to run this team on the second half, there's Rift Hounds, and the Rift Hounds are just going to slowly take away your HP. Sync Chill's not going to be enough for that. So, and yeah, basically these are sort of two team options you have for this. Now, really quickly, I will be super fast about the builds because it's super easy to go over. First off, you want an EM weapon. EM weapon's going to benefit you a lot. There's going to be exceptions to the build I'm going to show you here, but just for now, bear with me. Most people are going to use this one. You want to use an elemental mastery weapon. Missive Wind Spear is also okay, but Dragon's Bane is ideal. One thing that's worth thinking about is you can technically use Staff of Scarlet Sands. That ends up being okay, just because it gives you so much more damage to her personally, and it also allows you to use her burst. But typically speaking, we're not actually going to be using her burst. If you do want to use Raiden's burst, you can. You have the option to, but because of the build we're going to be showing you, you're not going to be using it most of the time. Now, for her artifacts, I'm using Flower of Paradise Lost. My set is really bad. You can see that here if we go through it. I spent like an absurd amount of resin on this and it came out barely usable, but that's okay. We have triple EM and that's what matters. That's what we're going for, is as much elemental mastery as possible. We have 973 EM. Now, the reason I'm using Flower of Paradise Lost, 80 EM, and it increases all of your Bloom, Hyperbloom, and Burgeon damage. This is technically better than Gilded Dreams. Unless you have a lot more EM on your Gilded Dreams set, it's technically a little bit better for Hyperbloom. But alternatively, you could use Gilded Dreams. You could also use 2-2 set with EM. You just want as much elemental mastery as possible, and the Flower of Paradise Lost set is just really good. So now, before I go over the other build with you, one thing that's important to know is that we have Raiden at level 90. 90 is where Raiden needs to be if you're going to be doing Hyperbloom. The reason is that Hyperblooms, and basically all reactions since the 1.6 update that are transformative, they all scale really highly off of your character's level as well. The amount of bonus you're getting off of your elemental mastery is directly correlating with your level. So the higher level, the more damage you do. It's that straightforward, but level does affect it a lot. So you're probably wondering, Brax, why we're not using Raiden's burst? That's like the coolest part of her kit. Why should we not use her burst? Is there any point where we should use her burst? So typically, the reason you don't need to use her burst is because her elemental skill has insane uptime. The uptime allows you to constantly get electro application in an AoE, and it's really consistently good. However, since we're building her with triple elemental mastery and an EM weapon, her personal damage with her burst is not actually that great. So as a result of that, you just don't really want to use it. You want to just make more blooms with Nahida, and then she'll be able to trigger all 5 of the hyper blooms or whatever it may be at that given time. There is a small ICD on Hyperbloom, so you're not actually getting the maximum damage possible, but typically speaking, having Nahida on field can be really beneficial. Now, there's a couple things that change the build for the character if you do want to get more damage out of the team as a whole. First off, you need to have Raiden C2. If you're going to do the alternate build, you need C2. If you don't have C2, you can just use the EM build and it's totally fine. And that's going to be the maximized damage for you. Your max damage is going to be great with Hyperbloom with the triple EM. You don't have to worry about it. But if you do have Constellation 2, you're going to be dealing more personal damage from Raiden. Second off, you want to replace Kokomi with Kazuha. If you do this, that means you're going to be getting a couple different things. One, Kazuha is going to be able to trigger the Hyperblooms. When Kazuha triggers Hyperblooms, he's full built elemental mastery and he gets a lot of damage out of them. On top of that, if you have Nahida's burst up, he's also getting a larger portion of elemental mastery bonus, and he's going to enhance your damage and lower enemy resistances. He's good all around. The third thing that you're going to want to do is actually run elemental mastery, attack or electro damage for the goblet, and crit for the circlet. You can actually run a hybrid elemental burst build Raiden with this and actually pull higher damage if you have Constellation 2 and if you're running someone like Kazuha. If you do that, you'll still get high Hyperbloom damage from your EM Sands and from the EM share from Nahida. And on top of that, you're also going to be getting Hyperblooms from Kazuha, so it's great. On top of your EM, electro, or attack and crit, you can also run Emblem of Severed Fate, which will help her get her elemental burst back up. The thing is, if you have that alternate build, you do want to use her burst, right? So you do need to have energy recharge. And at that point, it's basically like a normal Raiden build, except you're subbing out energy recharge sands for EM. However, most people are not going to have C2 and not have Kazuha fully invested and not have Nahida. There's going to be a lot of things that sort of stop you from that. And in that case, just stick with triple EM. EM's the easiest way to go. As mentioned before, you don't need to activate her burst. So now that I've sort of explained to you how this works, let me show you what this is like in Abyss. So basically, this team is really good in single target. So as we're fighting the PMA here, We're getting a lot of single target value out of it. We're gonna actually use Nahida's burst. And if we switch to Raiden, let me just show you how much more damage we're getting. We're getting 37k Hyperblooms. However, the problem is we're not spawning as many blooms with Raiden on the field, right? And so we actually do want to have Nahida out because that's more Hyperblooms overall. And that's more beneficial. So now we got to re-up Xingqiu, but we might as well re-up Raiden too. And we're actually almost through PMA already, which is... This is a pretty slow clear. Need to swap to Nahida. The Hyperbloom damage itself, when it reaches an enemy, is insane. And we need to re-up Xingqiu. Great. So now we're here. Gonna use her elemental skill. And he's just gonna die. The Hyperbloom damage is so high, it's just consistently really, really good. Now we're basically just gonna do the same thing here. We're gonna mark everyone. Use our elemental burst. Swap to Xingqiu. Get 2 elemental skills off with Xingqiu. Wait to get Xingqiu's burst up. Perfect. Now we swap to Nahida. And just holy. This team is so dumb. It's so easy. You don't have to think at all. You just turn your brain off. All right, we're gonna use our elemental burst again. Create some more blooms. Did not mean to switch to Raiden. Perfect. And just so much Hyperbloom damage. So much Hyperbloom damage. Now, I'm not saying that this is just the best way to play Raiden. To be honest, I still think Raiden National is super valid. I still think that Raiden Hypercarry is super valid. And they're honestly all just really easy to play teams. And I think that's one thing that makes Raiden really good, is that she just brings so much ease of play to the table. And Hyperbloom is so easy to play. It honestly doesn't even matter the order you press the buttons in. You could press the buttons in completely just like a random incorrect order, and you're still gonna be getting tons of Hyperbloom damage. So it's incredibly easy to play. It heat seeks, it tracks flying enemies. It's an amazing team, and if you're getting Raiden, I highly recommend you try this out because Hyperbloom is amazing. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to let me know down in the comments down below. I'm gonna be taking a little bit of a break for the holidays, but I'll be back soon. I appreciate all the support. Happy holidays, everyone, if you celebrate that sort of thing, and I'll catch you next time.